this is important for us to put on record that the panel, in our view, has been totally independent, and nobody that I'm aware of had asked them to do anything they do not wish to do. And so it's important for us to say that the conduct and proceedings of the panel has been, in my view, very, very commendable. And I also want to say that the people, the government of Lagos, and indeed the nation, will indeed be thankful to this panel. History will judge them, and I imagine it will judge them well. I'm believing and I'm trusting that this process will help us to start the very difficult process of proper reconciliation, restitution, bringing together of everyone that must have, in one form or the other, been affected by either the police or any of our citizens that must have been wronged by one form or the other.
Yeah, and so the countdown goes. Very interesting words there from the governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, about the Lagos NSAS panel, and all eyes are on those recommendations. And what will the white paper do? What will that committee, how will they go about their responsibility? So there's going to be so much that's been already talking points about that. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Amaya Makinde, good morning and welcome. The fact that the governor has spoken, has been speaking, possibly even really putting out press releases is cheering. But don't forget, as you began to speak about Marco, good morning, first of all.
He's just eager to go on. Wow.
For a moment there, forgive me. Good morning. Welcome our viewers to our Abuja studios. I'm Maokbe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, incidentally, Abuja also had its own panel set up. Well, interestingly, the original panel wasn't about NSAS specifically.
Original panel.
I mean, don't forget that it's the NSAS event. It was an expansion, so to speak. While at least the tollgate saga was an expansion of the functions of that panel set up by the governor and government of Lagos State. But what is interesting? Maybe we should even begin. What were the responses of the federal government to the 5-point demand?
But don't forget, right after that scenario, I don't know if it's almost immediately after, but it wasn't long after that, there was this report that is circulating that went viral on social media about what is said to be the report which was that committee is going to look into, after which they will come up with a white paper.
But incidentally, no one has refuted, no one has disclaimed what's
publicly
in social media
at the moment. No one yet.
If anyone has disclaimed it privately, how are we going to know?
Yeah, but
no one has disclaimed it, but
they could tell you privately and not publicly.
Well, well, maybe you relate. Mr. Peter Obi has said that you're one of them. So,
what?
So these things do happen. So all of the speculations, let's call that report speculations, that's been going on, and various kinds of persons have been speaking. The governor has spoken. A number of interest groups, hopefully, to show some of them in the quotes out there, will have been speaking about this thing. We're just hoping that at the end of the day, the important thing that will be put out will be to remedy the situation and not make it worse, because anything less than what people expect, it's just not going to all go well. It's not going to give us the desired results.
Yeah, and much as there's so much talk about the report that is making the rounds, about its contents, people have, already taking different positions, breaking it all down, and what it entails, what to do, how to proceed with all of those things, while that committee is going to do its work in 2 weeks, 13 days now. But we also have had senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana, who's waded into that conversation as well, saying, look, the Lagos State is duty-bound to implement that particular recommendations of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. He put up a statement. Yes, he commended the panel for what he says is a thorough investigation of police brutality in Lagos State, and then urged the state government to accelerate the issuance of the white paper, gentlemen, the white paper, ladies and gentlemen, as well as the implementation of the far-reaching recommendations. So, he did say that, yes, the government set up the Lagos State Human Rights Committee in line with the recommendations of the panel in the face of the continued abuses of security personnel. So that's why we did say, look, there's so many eyes on that report.
And the United Nations has also waded in somehow. No, UN and the US. The UN, for instance, Edward Callan, UN resident and humanitarian coordinator for Nigeria, spoke about the same thing, says, I urge the government to implement the recommendations of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry to rebuild trust and start the process of healing and reconciliation. The U.S. Embassy, of course, U.S. mission in Nigeria also said those events led to serious allegations against some members of the security forces. And we look forward to the Lagos State and federal governments taking suitable measures to address those alleged abuses as well as the grievances of the victims and their families. As you said, all eyes on that report.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah.
Interestingly, the report in Lagos has been, just before we introduce the Chief of Defense Staff and his comment on the report, reporters caught up with him in Edo State where he went to see the governor over a particular matter. But just before we move to his comments and other reactions which we have seen so far, the terms of reference of the report are quite telling. Let's not forget that the Judicial Panel of Inquiry was, the federal government had asked for state governments to constitute their judicial panels of inquiry. That of Lagos State was constituted on the 19th of October, 2020, and on the 20th of October was when we had the Lekki toll gate incident. And now from leaked reports, we're hearing that event has now been termed a massacre. We wait to see what the actual report is, because those who have said that the Lagos State government should make haste in releasing the report submitted to the people. We look forward to that, for an official release of that document. But even while we wait for that to happen, I mean, the terms of reference that this particular panel had, that of Lagos State was now expanded to include the incident at the Lekki toll gate. And I think that for many people, that has become the most paramount or the most important. That term of reference, I think, is a term of reference 5 of the panel, or Judicial Panel of Inquiry. But it was seen that it has become the most contentious and the most important part of the reports as submitted by the Lagos State Panel, Judicial Panel of Inquiry, because there was a lot of haze over what transpired on the night of the 20th to protesters who were at the Lekki toll gate. While we wait for that to come out, we do know that we were able to follow a lot of the proceedings of the panel as covered by our correspondent, Shola Shoele, who was always on ground to see what transpired. And some of the stories which we heard from victims who have been, who have survived police brutality was quite telling. And I think that, at the end of the day, it will be a testament to, or will I say, I'm looking for the right word now. The only way to actually heal, the only way to actually bring to reconciliation, the only way to actually do justice to those who are not only reported to have lost their lives on the night of the 20th, but for families who have suffered for long the trauma and carried the pain of police brutality that, you know, agents of state who were meant to protect them actually turned their instruments against them. It will be for justice to be done to this particular report. We await that happening because we heard a number of the stories, a number of the testimonies of the victims. While we wait for that to happen, there have been a number of other reactions. We've heard that of the US and the UN. The Chief of Defense Staff has also been, General Lucky Irabo has also been reacting to this particular report. So listen to what he had to say about it.
Can't tell, but I'd like to indicate that the normal procedure is to have such a report submitted to the convening authority, and then there will be a white paper that will be presented based on which one can make informed comments. But whatever it is currently, I'd like to indicate that the armed forces of Nigeria is a professional armed forces. We are pupilled by Nigerians and we remain committed to constitutional mandates. We do not at this point think that Nigerians should make disparaging remarks regarding the armed forces of Nigeria, in the sense that we are a professional armed forces. If there are issues, of course, we address them within the ambit of the provisions. It should not be right to disparage, men and women who have worked so hard to ensure that the territorial integrity of this nation is kept intact.
Well. So there you go. But, yes, much as different states were also asked to set up their own panel, they did set up that panel, and some of them have submitted their own report, so they're approaching it differently. So there will be that question concerning this Lagos State's NSAS Judicial Panel report. How will they proceed with it? The recommendations that are within the capability and capacity of the state. And then if it falls to that one that the federal government has got to attend to, what then happens? Because remember, we did say yesterday, will it be a way, are they going to wait? Would they say, well, we want to harmonize? So many will be waiting to see.
Yeah, but you said it there yesterday, and so it's good to reiterate it. Since it's the federal government that asked the states to set up the panels.
After which they were supposed to take action.
And set up panels and give reports. There are definitely, it's police brutality. It's on police brutality, and it's the federal government that is directly responsible for the Nigeria police, right? So let's wait.
So there you go. Many will be waiting to see what different governments at different levels do with this, because it is a huge talking point, I tell you. Well, that said, we're going to delve right into the dailies. I know your guests will be as good as mine in terms of what will they themselves, how will they focus on developments. Look at Vanguard newspaper, for instance. Yeah, it's the same subject matter. And why not? Act on NSAS, that's Act on NSAS report, the big lead on the front page of Vanguard today. UN, US, CSO, others tell Lagos State government panel makes 32 recommendations. Only white paper can confirm panel report. CDS, you heard that there. Government must implement recommendations. UN, US. Perpetrators must face justice. Amnesty International, Nigeria. Army must court-martial culpable soldiers, Body George. Indicted persons must be prosecuted, Peter side. But the governor of Lagos State, he's got his job cut out for him.
Oh, certainly.
Especially for those who think that, wait. If they're coming up, if they're setting up another panel to come up with this, so is it the tactics? People think different things. But then, I guess, 13 days now, we will see. Yes, it's a big lead on the front page of Vanguard, but don't forget what you see beneath that big lead stories, among several others. Economy. rescue funds came from banks' cash reserves. Emefiele says monetary fiscal authorities working in unison. Adds over 2 trillion naira loans disbursed at low rates. So you may need to just check out the details and see what that rate is. I know many expect single digit. Are we ever going to give out loans at 3% like some other countries so that our products can compete? Who knows? Who knows?
Seems to be pointing at AfCFTA already.
Whatever makes it work. If you flip to the back page, you see Vanguard Sports there. FIFA, of course, is World Cup qualifier. Nigeria playing that 1-1 draw with Cote d'Ivoire. Not the reports, the results many expected, and but no worries. That's Vanguard today.
The Nigerian Tribune toes the same line, talking about the Lagos NSAS panel report. US to Lagos FG, act on hashtag NSAS panel report. Stories on page 2. Excuse me. Panel submissions will accelerate process of justice and accountability, says UN Rep. Amnesty International, Reward PDP demand justice. We are suing Buhari, Serap. Send report to Buhari, Falana tells Sanwo-Olu. Army to make informed comment after white paper, CDS, to the Peter side, DJ Switch, Falls react. All of that on page 2 of the paper. So much said about that already. Now, there's this unfortunate incident that took place yesterday. That's what you have in the pictures there. 10-year-old boy, 4 adults die in Lagos gas explosion. Motion yesterday. Stories on page 26. Very sad indeed. By the way, didn't we say yesterday that ASU was threatening to go on strike? Well, NASU threatens strike over alleged bias and payment of earned allowances. That story is on page 30. As we say, government has its work cut out. Electoral Act Amendment, direct primary easier to manipulate by governors. Who's saying it? A governor. Autumn. Stories on page 4 of the paper. Of course, the Nigerian Tribune has sports on the back page. World Cup qualifier Eagles bag playoff tickets. Nigeria to play any of DR Congo, Ghana, or South Africa, Mali, Egypt, Senegal, Algeria. Oh, quite a list. The details on the back page.
Bring them on. Just bring them on.
Well, The Guardian has this one on the front page. Hashtag NSAS panel report. UN-US Falana demand accountability. That's the lead story on the front page of The Guardian. Defense chief faults procedure of release, insists armed forces are professionals. Governor yet to read submitted report, says spokesman. PDP demand prosecution of killers, collaborators. Apologize to Lagosians over Lekki tollgate shootings. Bode George urges Sanwo-Olu. Ex-CDHR boss raises concern over Lagos's committee to review panel reports. There's been some controversy over that. There are people who have said, you know what, Lagos State, you don't need another committee to review this. Just release the report. Well, we wait to see what happens and how they react to that. It's a page 2 read. In the meantime, we're keeping tabs on the Lagos State government. Promise to release a white paper in 2 weeks. A number of other stories here. Court rules on suit seeking Soludo's disqualification November 30. Justice Odili, Wike demands immediate prosecution of invaders. It's a page 3 read. Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspapers.
Take a look at New Telegraph next. NSAS panel's report. U.S. awaits response from FG Lagos over alleged abuses as opposition George demand probe prosecution of indicted officers. So while many wonder if there needed to be another panel to review the recommendations of that panel, others think, so will there be another panel to implement the recommendations of the white paper afterwards?
It's a government process. It's the way government does business.
Well, that's New Telegraph this morning anyways.
Well, the Daily Trust newspaper is interested in something completely different, at least on its front page. Tree felling on the rise as cooking gas price skyrockets. Please bear in mind that we're talking about climate change. And this is going on now. Households, restaurants resort to firewood and charcoal. Its threat to human existence, ascribed to experts, stories on page 5. Of course, you can see firewood market or trading on the front page in pictures right there on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. Several other stories, of course, NSAS US asks FG Lagos to ensure justice, compensation for victims is also on the front page. Mark.
You know, it only takes a few days to use up all of this firewood. It takes up years to grow the trees. So one will wonder, as we fell the trees, are we planting new ones? The people who fell them, are they aware of the implication of their actions? Yes, we must cook, we must eat, but is it also too much to ask that while as they fell the trees, is it possible for them to plant new ones? At least there is hope that, you know, in future, their own children will be able to see trees to cook if we're still using that mode of cooking. At least, and if we're not, prayerfully we won't, at least there will be cleaner air. Let's look at what the leadership has on the front page. 13 days to December 1 deadline. MDA's foot drag over compulsory COVID-19 vaccination for workers. Vaccination is voluntary, workers insist. Await memo. Federal government launches massive vaccination campaign Friday. Says there are enough vaccines and manpower. It's a page 4 read. I keep asking, why is it so difficult to take the vaccines to where the people are? When we were serious about oral polio vaccine, we took it everywhere we knew children will go. Why aren't these vaccines being administered in marketplaces, at malls, at places of worship? Why aren't we taking it to the people to ensure a wider coverage? Big question. I'm still not convinced by the answer, if we're getting any at all. Non-implementation of Naira invoice for port charges worsens fuel scarcity. Yesterday in Abuja, there was some panic buying. We understand Nupeng had also released a statement. But look at this. Non-implementation of Naira invoice for port charges worsens fuel scarcity. Only genuine negotiation can save Nigeria. That's from Fayemi. We're poised to end killings. The Southeast governors and federal government unveil sectors to achieve new development plan. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
News Direct next then. Fuel queues resurface nationwide. Motorists spend hours to buy fuel in Abuja, others. I know. You thought that...
But the NNPC had, debunked this earlier, and so the experiences of people seem to be different from what the NNPC is saying.
Doing the same thing, expecting different results. Did it sound familiar? Okay, well, that's New Telegraph today.
The Daily Times is interested in ASU strike. ASU strike won't happen, Ngige assures. Well, he said that much on Politics Today last night, so you may want to go to channelstv.com to see the whole interview. But that's what the Daily Times newspaper leads with. It says funds for payment of lecturers are available. Reps urge FG to do everything possible to stop ASU's impending industrial action. And then Osinbajo seeks improved market acceptability of made in Nigeria products. All of that on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. Malcolm.
Okay, take a look at Daily Independent then as we just end up. Broadband, bridging access gap in rural areas will linger. That's from telcos. So you may ask yourself, why would that be? You thought that it was all possibly hunky-dory? Well, now you have this one.
But if that's a challenge, I I'm wondering, elections and all those things.
Well, speaking about elections, look at what's on the bottom strip there. Ex-PDP chair Muazu fled Nigeria day before 2015 presidential poll. George reveals how he brought secondus from Rivers PDP to National Secretariat. So all of that making the rounds, and who knows, expect a lot more of that as we approach the time. So there you go. That is it with a look at some of the dailies here today. Don't forget to keep your comments coming through about whatever you may have heard or feel strongly about here. Just give us a moment. We will be back. Well, yeah, so to talk about that and a little more, we've got Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kader, who is the Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. He joins us from Durban, where that is going on. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program.
Morning, and thank you for having me.
Okay, so go ahead and give us a mood of what it is like there. Now that there's this talk about making after work, the leaders are talking about that. There's always been a huge conversation about inter-African trade and then the advantages it confers on Nigeria. So tell us, how is that panning out at the moment?
Well, thank you again. I think one of the major pillars of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is this trade fair, which brings together companies and businesses from all over Africa to showcase what they have, to engage in business deals, and to generally have information about what is available. We remember that nobody really told us not to trade amongst ourselves. But the fact that we do not have a platform for engaging each other, the fact that we do not have information about what is available, the fact that we do not know what cross-border value chains could be built, had been largely responsible for the low level of trade in the continent. So with this kind of fair, it's possible to have all of us under the same roof, literally, and then to get to talk to each other and be aware. As you rightly reported earlier, we have more than 1,000 exhibitors from all over Africa. Last year, deals worth about 32 billion was struck. The ambition now is to get it to 40 billion. We also have people discussing the infrastructure challenge, what is needed to be able to boost intra-African trade. So generally speaking, the mood is high. It's just day 3. And there are so many conversations taking place in different segments, addressing specific sectoral issues, addressing governance issues, addressing non-tariff barrier issues that we know we need to overcome in order for the AfCFTA to work. So I think the mood you get here is that Africa is on the move, and we are. This is a good step in integrating the continental economy.
Well, the interesting thing about all that you have said is that at least we have all realized the fact that Africa needed to trade more. Data puts intra-Africa trade to by something in the region of 16% of all that is done. And from understanding available, the projection of the AfCFTA is that it'll increase intra-Africa trade by at least 33%. But since we have identified that we hadn't been trading, and you have said, okay, maybe it's because we didn't have a platform, I'm wondering if that's the only constraint or inhibition you see. What are those things that had hindered or mitigated intra-Africa trade hitherto? Because, I mean, permit me to speak like a layman. Isn't it easier to buy from my next door neighbor than to buy from afar?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. And I think this is a very important question you have asked. And that was majorly the reason why MAN advised government to be circumspective in signing on to AfCFTA. There are so many challenges. For instance, for you to export a product from some African countries, you first have to take it to Europe, then bring it back to the African country you are exporting to. The sheer cost of logistics will make it uncompetitive because my brother on the streets of Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire is not going to buy Emzor paracetamol because it is made by a sister in Nigeria. He will buy because when you put it side by side with an analgesic from Brazil or from Paris, it's going to be cheaper or it's going to be more effective. So at the end of the day, the issue of cost in the marketplace will be very important. There is also the issue of cross-border challenges. Some of them are even non-tariff. So it's not enough for you to bring down the tariffs, 90% of the tariff to zero. If you bring it down to zero and it's not possible for you to move easily, many of our exhibitors that we brought from Nigeria, for instance, found it very, very difficult to get visas to South Africa. If you cannot move persons, how will you be able to move goods? So we have to break down all those barriers to trade. There's no reason why we shouldn't have one African passport, that as an African, you should be able to move around. If I have business deals in a place and it took us up about 24 hours to get here. So there has to be a conversation as to addressing those issues. Again, you have the issue of, absence of marine trade among us, because we are all surrounded by water. Yet, ships do not find it economically viable to take goods from Nigeria to South Africa, for instance, because you have to be mindful that there are some constant costs that the ship owner has to bear. And if you look at the volume of trade, it may not be competitive, to engage in such a trade. So there are so many issues. And like I told you, at this second intra-African trade fair is addressing most of it. There has been conversations. We attended one yesterday about the automobile industry. There are more than 2,500 parts to a car. And you can imagine if you build value chains across Africa, we should be able to have hubs where automobiles will be manufactured. So they are addressing issues on sector basis. And I think that is the direction to go.
Sometimes, one wonders if maybe the body language of the leadership there, governments, is anything to go by, because there usually is that conversation as to the place of the private sector and the commitment of government to ensure that they bridge that gap and ensure that these kind of things are not that difficult for us to implement. So from what you see around you there, do you see sufficient push and participation from the private sector with government opening the door to allow them drive some of these processes such that it can indeed work properly?
And I will say I've seen, because I understand exactly where you are going. But honestly, there's a concern. We've had speeches. In fact, there was a reference to Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana when he said more than 50 years ago that Africa should integrate. We have not achieved that. With politicians, it may never happen, except you have a platform for effectively engaging the private sector. And that's why we have formed what we call the Pan-African Manufacturers Association, to at least take care of the issues of trade in goods. We now have a platform that all manufacturers associations in Africa are coming together to be able to deliberately seek to overcome these challenges. So the idea is that at the continental level, we are able to engage the African Union. And in our individual economies, we are able to advocate so that our governments will remove those barriers that prevent the effective linkage of our economies. If we leave it to the governments alone and the politicians alone, it will not happen, because we have had so many agreements in the past. We have had I think it's the Lagos Plan of Action, we have had the treaty in Abuja, and all the RECs, the regional economic blocks, they have had plans to get integrated. But you see, when it remains at government levels and there's no effective conversation with the private sector, it doesn't work. But this time around, I think AfCFTA had indicated that they should mainstream the participation of the private sector such that we'll be able to work together. Because governments will never have the resources to build roads, for instance, that will link our countries. They will never be able to engage in those trade facilitation infrastructures that will lead to effective trade. So I think you have hit the nail on the head. From what I see here, there's a demonstration of political will. I don't know if it will matter, but the private sector should be engaged, and we are watching very closely. With this platform, we'll be able to engage governments at different levels, both within our countries and at the continental level. In fact, later this morning, we are going to officially launch the Pan-African Manufacturers Association, and then it will be something that will be recognized by the African Union, and we are going to be able to shake hands across borders.
Well, we'll wait to see what the launch of that is going to yield. It does sound like a very good idea, and I believe that it's been thought through. Nonetheless, and it's also very good to see you in Durban. We understand that Nigeria made, as the president said, they went in full force. And it's good to see just what we have on display in Durban. However, internal challenges remain. We know the challenges that Nigeria faces by itself in terms of even doing business. We have the presidential panel on ease of doing business. We have been able to make some progress, but the challenges remain, starting from our airports. What is I do not know what is driving your optimism that on your return back home, some of the challenges which you as manufacturers face, sometimes peculiar to us, because some other African countries have already dealt with theirs and successfully too. How optimistic are you that, you know, some of the challenges that confront the ease of doing business in Nigeria will be addressed for good?
Yes, thank you. You know, the process of engaging government is a very tough one, I must admit, and sometimes it can be frustrating. But we are gaining traction. For instance, even while here, we engaged the government delegation, and we were able to discuss this within the framework of a fairly enlarged platform that brought in business leaders from other parts of of Africa. And we were able to discuss about how far they have been able to address some of the challenges that the domestic manufacturers are raising. We have Nigeria, for instance, has been going up in terms of its performance in ease of doing business. But you see, ease of doing business that does not translate to reduction in the cost of doing business. It's not, with due respect, it's not useful, because at the end of the day, you allow a business, you facilitate the emergence of a business only for it to collapse under the weight of the cost of doing business. If you are not competitive, your goods will not leave your territory. And if you push them out of your territory, it will remain on the shelf and you will run at a loss. So these are very basic issues that we are engaging government. Fortunately for us, we have a platform, the National Action Committee on AfCFTA, that tends to integrate all ministry departments and agencies of government that are connected with facilitating trade. We are working very closely with them, and they are here. So we are also having a conversation that when we get back to Nigeria, it should not be business as usual. We will have seen the progress that is being made in other countries. We need to replicate it in Nigeria. I'm so optimistic, and I know that Nigeria will be a major beneficiary in this AfCFTA only if we do the right things, and we know those right things. Government needs to work more with the private sector. As we speak, my enthusiasm is only based on what I see coming in the future. Optimism is based on what I know my members, for instance, the manufacturers can do, what I know our service sector in Nigeria can give to Africa. Our stand here is the biggest stand. And when our minister was going around, some other of my friends from Malawi, from Cote d'Ivoire, so they're asking, you guys are intimidating us. Are you the only one that has a minister for industry, trade, and but he was having a conversation with them as to what needed to be done. So on the face of it, we understand everything. So I think it's just for us to put more action into the understanding that we have. But going back to Nigeria, I mean, we've had so much exposure, and we are doing it at the same time. The National Action Committee on AfCFTA is here. The Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment is here. NEPC is here. MAN is here. And we have so many of our members. So I think there's a kind of bonding that we have had now that is recharging us, so that when we get back to our country, we know what to do to take over Africa. Africa is ours for the taking, and we just have to do the right things.
While we also, wait to take over Africa, there were initial fears about the AfCFTA. Remember that when it was signed initially, Nigeria did not sign on immediately. It took a while for us to sign on to that. And we've also had even our issues with even our regional body, ECOWAS, where we've had to, close our borders as a result of dumping. So there were fears before Nigeria eventually signed on. Nigeria looks like, as you rightly said, Africa is ours for the taking. However, we also know that we have a very virile market. We have a market that is also very attractive to Africa, so to speak. The question is, what are we going to be doing now to ensure that we take care of the fears, the initial fears, that our place could be a place where goods are dumped, and reverse that to a place where we actually produce and serve other countries?
Yes, I mean, MAN was part of that fear. And because of the fear, we actually commissioned a study. And we looked at 25 African countries vis-a-vis their relationship with Nigeria. Government also did the study. And we had more than 85% correlation in the studies that we did. We will be at the losing end if we do not do A, B, C, D. So government is aware. And we are, like I said, we are working with government to be able to overcome those challenges. Nigeria, many of my friends have told me here that in Nigeria that we buy what we like and not what we need. And this is a manufacturer's delight. I mean, you buy so that you'll be able to produce and the economy grows. So we are best placed, even when you compare with other African countries, except we have people doing trade infractions and do transshipment and so on. We are not really put too much in a disadvantaged position, but so many African countries are putting their acts right. They are putting the best foot forward. So I think Nigeria should join in that league. We have infrastructure challenge that makes it impossible for us to produce at rates that are competitive. I think those ones are settled matters that we need to immediately address. And like the president said here, the reforms that have been proposed by government in infrastructure, in power, and so on, they are there on paper, but we are slow in achieving them. In some cases also, we have had policy inconsistency. I think, like I said, we seem to have an understanding here that going back to Nigeria, it will not be business as usual. The last time that we had this intra-African trade, Nigeria, I think, had not signed. So you can see now that we are here. I mean, everybody is looking around to see what Nigeria is going to do. And I think we need to rise to the occasion. We had our fears. Government knows what should be done to overcome those fears. The government went all over the country in the 6 geopolitical zones to get inputs. We have the inputs. They established an action committee on AfCFTA. It is established. In fact, MAN is leading the manufacturing work stream on that platform. So the engagement process is on. All we just need to do is to intensify efforts and to put action to the words that we have. I think it's not only on the government side. The private sector also has to ensure that we give the right support and we insist on certain basic basic issues that we have to deal with that should not remain a challenge for us. The incidence of closing borders and the rest is actually very unfortunate. I don't think any country should consider to do that because you don't just close your borders. And at the end of the day, you will see that the government will lose, the people will lose, and relationship will be strained. I pray that Nigeria will never have any reason to close this border, though there are security concerns and the rest. But, you know, in business, life must go on. You need to quickly resolve these issues and not resorting to this arbitrary and quite unfriendly trade behavior.
You know, from those fears that you say you have and raised, have you seen any sufficient action on the part of government to address some of them, even if you call them low-hanging fruits? I mean, back home here now.
Yeah, sufficient, not really, but the actions are being taken, and we hope will drive them to fruition. But whether it's sufficient, I can't answer in the affirmative. I can't. Frankly speaking, I can't.
I don't know if the president's statement at that same event that you attending right now, I don't know if that statement that he made is in any way some form of suasion for you. The president was quoted to have said, governments must support local entrepreneurs to build scale and therefore improve productivity. This means providing incentives to encourage our businesses to formalize and comply with laid-down regulations. Is this in any way assuaging? And if so, what kind of incentives, what kind of support would you be expecting any governments, federal or state or even local, to give to scale up?
Yes, I think it does assuage because, like I said, government is making quite a number of efforts. I mean, we are considering tariff that will support manufacturing. There's reform in the power sector. There is infrastructure incentive, the one that allows you to build infrastructures and get tax breaks and compensations. There are quite a number, but whether it is sufficient enough to say that we do not have more challenges, no. I think we need to continue to work on those and expand. Because now I think with the president being, and he went around all the stands in Nigeria. He even came to Man Stand and we explained what we are doing. He commended us for spearheading the formation of the Pan-African Manufacturers Association. Okay, these ones are suiting. And I think from what he has seen, it is evident that the market is there for us and that if we do the right things, we will succeed. So I think this is just going to give the impetus that is needed to expand the reforms that are being made and to avoid as much as possible reversals of policies before they deliver the fruits. So I think we still have a lot of work to do, but it is comforting to hear Mr. President, and he assured us when he came to stand, for instance, that the priority will be given to addressing the challenges that we have. My take is that leaving South Africa, leaving Durban, and going back to Nigeria, it will not be business as usual. Don't also forget that the private sector is also getting more and more educated by its interaction across Africa. We now have an understanding that all of us will speak the same language when we are addressing our heads of states ahead of the African Union meetings, and even in our recs. We are also strategizing on how to put pressure on government and how to engage the politicians more effectively so that we'll be able to have a developed continent. Because, I mean, I don't think there's any continent in the world that is as endowed as we are. And it just beats me sometimes when I reflect on why we have abandoned all these opportunities. And we continue to seek lesser and more disadvantageous relationship with people outside of the continent.
Well, you've raised my apologies. You raised issues about what government needs to do, and that's on the government side. How about the private sector side? You're aware of that report from NAFDAC, for instance, that says that some of our exports were rejected. So simply because they didn't, rise to par. And there are those pointing fingers at private sector practitioners, producers, manufacturers, small and medium enterprises, not going through the proper process of exporting. So what kind of conversations will MAN be having with its members, excuse me, in order to ensure that they also follow the due process of getting things done? Because unless that is done as well, it's going to cast aspersion on those who are doing wonderfully well.
Yeah. In a general sense, the private sector, is very large. And since you asked about MAN specifically, we have a MAN export group. We call it MANEC. And we have constant engagement with regulatory agencies. We interact with our counterparts from all over Africa and even in the world. We do not have that kind of challenge, particularly those that are in MAN export group. But I would like to address the issue generally. There has to be education. Nigeria is not the only country that has its exports being rejected. Of course, if you are exporting to a country, you need to know the standard that is accepted here. In the first instance, we also have our standards organization in Nigeria. We have SON, we have NAFDAC, and so on and so forth. So most of those products don't even satisfy the local standards before they are exported. And if you want to export, they will give you advice on what is acceptable in those countries. You just need to comply. So if there are some maybe traders or some producers that are exporting without following the laid down regulations, then they are not in business. But this not to say that we don't have countries that deliberately try to keep our goods out, not because we have not made the standard, but they are raising non-tariff barriers that will hinder our export. There's also this offensive trade diplomacy that some countries engage in. So I do not want to absolve Nigerians, but I will just encourage that, one, it is necessary for you to follow the standards, and we have the capacity to do so. So it is only those that are probably not aware, and I don't think we have a member in MAN that is not aware of this.
Okay, Mr. Kade, just give us a couple of minutes, just one more item. We know you need to catch up with the next item for your schedule. Just one more matter when we return from the break, and we'll wrap it up. So don't go away. As we conclude on this matter, there are those who equally raise concerns as to external interference, perhaps making use of maybe some African leaders to scuttle this plan for Africa to trade and enhance trade amongst themselves, which is a huge, huge quantity in terms of the financial benefits. So do you have concerns? Is this something that anyone should be concerned about? And if so, what would your recommendations be as to how that should be approached?
Yes, thank you. I think it's a very, very concerning matter, even for more mature economic zones and in the other free trade areas around the world, even in the European Union. So it's a concerning matter, and especially in Africa, where you have economies that are weak and easily susceptible to manipulations by more advanced economies. So the problem is there, but we have indicated that the best way to tackle this matter is to have a rule of origin protocol that protects the African economies. So you are able to determine which good is originating from which country. So far, we have achieved 87% of the negotiation in that area, rule of origin. That was mentioned, I think, the day before yesterday, yes, it was on Monday, by the Secretary General of the AfCFTA Secretariat. So we have achieved 87% of the more than 5,000 tariff lines. So it will be possible for us to determine effectively how, where the goods are coming from. And I think that's the fundamental issue. The additional issue that we need to do in our various countries is to ensure that we have the capacity to be able to enforce it. In fact, that was the issue that I mentioned to the Secretary General before we parted on Monday, that it is critically important for the AfCFTA sector to have the capacity to enforce this rule of origin. And where you also have a dispute, the dispute resolution mechanism should be effective, fast, and should come with some finality that will allow you to have redress immediately. So trade infraction happens everywhere, but you need to take steps to make sure that you minimize it. And I think that is one area that Nigeria really, really, really needs to put its foot down, that it must be done. And I think the president, our president, President Buhari, also mentioned it yesterday, that it would be important that the goods that are traded in Africa should be goods that are made in Africa, not people engaging in such trade infractions and bringing it from third countries and to come and overwhelm our indigenous companies. I think that is critically important and is of concern. It's been mentioned in so many conversations around here that we need to, first of all, we need to talk to ourselves and make us believe in the sanctity of the African market. It's a 1.2 billion people market. It will be attractive to all those trade scavengers around the world. So, I mean, it will be tested. And Africa has to rise up to the occasion. I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges that my friend Wamkele is going to meet, and I've told him so. Yes.
All right, so let's wind down with this one now. And in furtherance of the question and concerns to ensure that this is not circumvented, for instance, if maybe an external body or Western foreign countries or manufacturers coming to Africa begin to manufacture in Africa and then repatriate their funds, how do we approach that? Can we tell them not to repatriate their funds or what?
Yeah, I think it will have to depend on the individual country's policy on trade, the industrial policy. And this brings up the question as to why in Nigeria, for instance, we do not still have an industrial and trade policy that will guide how we relate with people, whether they are investors in country or they are foreign direct investors or they are portfolio investors. What are they entitled to? What is the economy going to gain? Are they going to be able to repatriate all the profit and so on and so forth? But I mean, we need to have that conversation. And across Africa, one cannot, I don't think it's possible to have a general approach to it. Though when we integrate, we can influence each other. It depends on how hungry you are or what your ambition is or what your aspiration is. If you are desperately in need of bringing in foreign capital, it may reduce, it may lessen your capacity to determine how much of the profit can be repatriated. So I think, again, it depends on the level of your development and the strength of your negotiation in different countries. But I think it is critically important for us to have our investment laws across the region support the retention of profit within the continent.
All right, Mr. Segun Ajayi, Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we've now been joined by Dr. Ricardo King, who is a public policy analyst. Thank you for coming on. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, listening through to all of this, yes, there are concerns as to how we ensure that this works. I mean, there will be plus or minus 5–10%, maybe areas that we may not be able to get it right. But from what you've seen of all of these policies and the intention, the comment of the president of Nigeria saying we have to make this work, how do you see this playing out?
Thank you very much. But you see, there are a number of concerns when you have to try to make this work because the strategies are on two different planes. There's going to be a strategy within Nigeria how to make it work, which will involve manufacturing and how we can ramp up our own production and be able to produce the services needed. And then you're also going to have the issue of how to make this work within the African context. For example, you could say the low-hanging fruits will be something like complementary trade. If the presidents are able to negotiate complementary trade, then they are able to get their countries to work around it in terms of what African countries already demand from other continents, how they can reroute such demands within Africa. You could say that's complementary. But one of the biggest problems making this work is going to come back to trade routes, your trading routes. Because from time immemorial, the major thing that the Europeans did when they came in was to alter our trading routes. And so right now, even if you have Zimbabwe producing maybe a lot of maize, you might not have a direct route of getting that to maybe Cote d'Ivoire that wants it or Nigeria that wants it. So trying to sit again to see how you could recreate the trading routes within the continent. That's why I said there's going to be a strategy continent-wise to recreate these trading routes so that you can have normal transport routes or normal movements. And that will require investments, either investment in shipping, investments in rail lines. But that's a conversation that is going to happen with, on the governmental level about how to recreate trading routes.
Because right now, it's even more difficult for one to fly probably from Lagos or Abuja to, say, Cote d'Ivoire, to Benin or something, without having to go through, divert yourself and then spend hours before you get to your neighbor. As I was saying, isn't it? Can't I just buy from the neighbor there? So you can even get to Europe faster than getting to one of these West African countries.
Exactly. That's the alteration of the trading routes. So you have to they have to look at how to tackle that trading route issue before you talk about the low-hanging fruit of a complementary trade, about things we already produce that we could ramp up scale on. Then before we now talk about the nitty-gritty, about the real issues on the agreements in terms of the fears. Like if you look at, the president said something about incentives. Mm-hmm. You can't just give incentives without being very tactical on how those incentives will go. Look at what happened with the US in their NAFTA agreements. They had incentives, but you can't really, a company in Nigeria, if the incentive is better for him to be outside Nigeria, you will not be able to tell him to stop, to switch the African country that he's operating from. So all those things have to be factored in before you say you're going to make incentives.
So that means in some cases, sorry to jump in, it means that there will be cases where it will just have to wait maybe between 10 years before we can be competitive, because some of them will involve huge infrastructural development.
Some will involve, but that's why I say you have to target the low-hanging fruit. Maybe there is something that is needed very urgent, that the scale, the margin from that trade is worthwhile. You could now look at it whereby such trade, the trader is going to pay for itself.
For instance?
For instance now, if we look at Nigeria, we have petroleum. We could also start looking at how we could integrate the whole of West Africa into our supply line. Instead of talking about smuggling, we could look at why don't we integrate the whole of West Africa, and then look at how we supply everybody at once.
Okay, that raises a question of capacity. I mean, you talked about oil now. We know that rather than produce petroleum products in the country, we export the raw material and import the finished products. So it raises a question of capacity, not just of infrastructure, but of capacity. And the oil is just, petroleum is just one sector. But I don't know if we can say that that's a specialty that Africa has. Africa is largely agrarian. I don't know if that is, I mean, you would be able to speak to that more. Perhaps maybe it's just sub-Saharan Africa. So talking about capacity, beginning from capacity of African countries, the private sector in African countries, the public sector in African countries, how significantly do you see us needing to bridge capacity in order to be competitive, even within and among ourselves?
Yeah, that's why I told you that we need another strategy within the country in terms of being able to compete, because already we are talking about increases in electricity by next year.
Oh.
We are talking about increases in, talking of removal of subsidy by June next year. So definitely that's going to increase your production costs. And you have to think about how Nigerian companies will be able to compete within the continent with these additional increases in energy. Because something we don't always realize is that when you talk of your factors of production, energy is not mentioned, but it's like giving. It is the most important factor of production. Your energy cost is baseline. Whatever it is will affect every other thing. So at times when we talk about removing subsidy and we talk about getting transportation and buses, we are missing the point. Your hairdresser cannot work without that little petrol. Your barber can't work. Everything runs on a baseline of energy. So whatever your energy cost is, that will determine whether you're even going to compete or not.
And when you say appears that we gloss over it, when they teach you basic principles of factors of production in economics, land, labor, capital, and
yes.
You don't even talk about energy.
Yeah, because it's giving is the most important. In fact, the whole industrial revolution is based on that.
And now that they talk about us, taking away coal, which many of those economies developed their economies with, and some of the economies are still grappling, crawling, trying to get to that level. And then, of course, the world will always move on. But in terms of coming up with that continent-wide, and not just continent-wide now, because even within the same continent, it has to be country-specific projects and policies that will ensure that your local industries benefit first.
Exactly, because even if you take, right now, we need to also look at how to nurture our industries, because you can't compete with the global giants. If any of the global giants should move into an African country, yes, you say it's FDI, they will come in, they will set up shop, but definitely for a local company to be able to compete with them on that scale, they don't yet have, we don't really have the backbone.
Which raises again the question of capacity.
Exactly.
Of the Nigerian, of the African to do those things. So what are the things? I mean, I can't even begin to talk about low-hanging fruits right now because there is no land to even plant anything that's going to produce any low-hanging fruit. So in terms of must-do, I mean, Chamberlain is already scaling up to say 10 years before we begin to even maximize anything. In terms of must-do, what are the must-do within the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
You see, there's something in that agreement where they talk about competition. It's because this agreement is modeled after the EU one. And you find out that right now we still have the little gap whereby maybe CBN, you can help your different sectors, anchor borrowers plan, all those things. By the time that next phase of AfCFTA kicks in, you have like state aid rules, whereby you will not be able to even help the companies, except you're going to do it across board to anybody, even the foreign investor that comes in. So when we start talking about capacity, we have to be very deliberate about how we channel our demand in order to be able to use that demand to build up local companies.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so wind down, right?
A number of, and you may be aware of this, micro, small, and medium enterprises say, and of course you listen to the man DJs say the same thing, that producing in country is very expensive. He said something, and I think I wrote it down. Ease of doing business without costs of doing business being reflected is useless.
Of course.
So how do we begin to mend those fences? Because if it is expensive to produce, it definitely is going to affect capacity to produce, capacity to ramp up productivity, and which will definitely affect our capacity to compete competitively.
Exactly. So that's why I told you the most important baseline is your energy. If we cannot look at a way where the government looks at us having, because you basically have two strategies. Either you are going to be the lowest cost producer, or you are going to produce for a niche. And when we are talking about ramping up production, that means you are trying to look at maximizing costs. For you to have low costs, energy has to come down. Before you now talk about manpower costs in Africa generally is low, but your energy cost is going to be a major factor whether you can compete with the rest of the world.
You know, there are just so many factors here, and the states have a huge role to play as well.
And then if I will add this thing, there might be a need to negotiate within the African countries about maybe like a standard rate, maybe for FDI in terms of tax rate. They may, just for fairness, because if you're maybe in Nigeria now, if we say corporate tax is 30%, and then maybe our neighbor in Chad says corporate tax is 2%, FDI is going to go there, and he will produce into your country. So there might be a need to have a baseline to say, okay, this might be a baseline among all of us for us to be in this whole thing together, so that nobody goes way and undercuts the other.
In the event that that fails, we have to have other layers. For instance, we know that, yes, we'll have the numbers, but it's not just going to be about the numbers, because we can't stop some of those countries, too, from taking advantage of their own strengths as well.
Of course.
So if they do that, and we feel we can say, okay, well, if any good is going to come, or services or products are going to come into this country, we can then say, as several people have suggested, well, a certain component of your products, if you have to bring them here, your raw materials or something have got to come from here. That way, but it's up to our chief negotiators and several other people to work out a policy that works for us, because there can be one size fits all kind of scenario. But it's always a growing concern, something that I'll keep focusing on as we progress. We have to thank you for coming on, Dr. Ricardo King. So we will be back, and well, I didn't even talk about how do we make sure that politics is not our biggest industry. Maybe, who knows how that will be received. But just we'll toss to Abuja when we return.
Well, the elections in Anambra State have since been conducted, and a winner has been declared. They were conducted on the 6th of November, that was on Saturday, and concluded on a Tuesday, the Tuesday immediately after, because the elections they could not conduct it in one local government area. So they went back on Tuesday to conduct it in Ihiala local government area specifically. Now we know a winner has been declared. Professor Charles Soludo of AfCFTA, the All Progressives Grand Alliance, is now the governor-elect. He's waiting to be sworn in, and hopefully next year, sometime in March, that should happen. But the lessons from the elections remain. How will we continue to make sure that our electoral process gets better? And the only way to do that is to review what it is that has been done before. Joining us right now to do that is Chief Victor Ome, who is the former national chairman of the All Progressives Grand Alliance. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. I'm sure that you're still in victory mode because your party eventually came first at the elections. How did that leave you feeling?
Well, very excited. And if you recall, the victory did not actually come to me as a surprise. Because you remember, I was there on the 25th of June when we were starting, and there were a lot of issues cropping up. And I said here emphatically that Professor Charles Chukuma Soludo will contest the election for AfCFTA on the 6th of November, and that he and AbGA will win the election resoundingly. That was an emphatic statement I made. I did say that because of what I knew that were on ground. And having gone through a very tortuous journey, which you followed too, and eventually the election took place, and he won. Not only that he won with AbGA in 19 out of 21 local government areas. So I'm happy. My predictions came true. And to that extent, we put behind all the somersaults that greeted the process before his eventual emergence as governor-elect.
But oftentimes, the somersaults usually have implications for the future.
Yeah.
There are always misgivings. I want to first of all start with the misgivings you had with within your party. It would seem that before even Professor Charles Soludo could be declared the candidate of your party, there were hurdles to cross. How have you, as a party, internally resolved some of those conflicts?
Well, you know that electoral contests, both within the party and outside the party, has always been rancorous because people don't manage their ambitions properly, particularly according to law and due process. So when somebody gets on the wrong side of the whole thing, the next thing he will resort to will be to throw sand up. And from there, onlookers may not have the full grasp of the issues within, and they begin to go on with things they read in the media. We knew that the attempt to stop Soludo from becoming AbGA candidates was a mere human creation that will pelt away when subjected to the judicial process. And I said it here to remember, when he was not published as the candidate of AbGA. I came back here to say that INEC had no reason to do so, and the Benin Kudu High Court judgment ought not to be relied upon because it was based on nothing. But being a country governed by law, we were asked to go through due process to get the judgment vacated, which finally we did. The Court of Appeal set aside that judgment. They have quickly appealed to the Supreme Court, and we thank the judiciary. All the confusion was arrested when the Supreme Court dismissed the same judgment, affirming the judgment of the Court of Appeal, and emphatically said Soludo was a validly nominated candidate. So for people who got entrapped in that type of confusion, they have to deal with it. Those of us who are in the majority in the party, we knew where the leadership of AbGA was, we knew where it is up to today, and we knew the candidate that will obtain victory for the party. So the stakeholders aligned with that line, and eventually look at the outcome now. Everything has ended very well. That candidate that Anambra people yearned for, Professor Chukuma Soludo, won the election in a landslide fashion. So internally in the party, it is soul searching for those who were on the wrong side of the adventure, because I was chairman of the Peace and Reconciliation Committee set up by the leader of the party, Governor Willie Obiano. So at every time, every opportunity, I extended invitations to these people who were dissenting to come back to the fold, that they will not achieve anything. Based on my experience as a party administrator, I was national chairman of AbGA for 10 years. And when they went into that trajectory, I knew they will crash. So I kept talking to them off the scene, counseling them to lay down their arms and come back to the party. Even when the Supreme Court delivered the judgment, I called all of them. Come back. Some of them came back, actually, and I joined in welcoming them back into the party just before the election. Those who were the ring leaders were adamant. They moved over to APC, and at the election, they were not noticed. All of them crashed out. So it's for them now to decide on what to do. If they still love ABGA as a party, they have to come back. The party is for everybody. You must not get what you want in a political party. You know, you have to allow, one, God to see you through. Then, two, you must allow the will of the party people to prevail. That is the same will that will prevail in the general election itself. So our hands are wide open to everybody. I saw the national chairman of the party in one of the interviews reaction to the end of the exercise. He said, if they show remorse and come back, there must be penitence. They must come back with a contrite heart. Because what actually happened was that a lot of them showed clearly that they will not subject themselves to the authority of the party. No matter what you do, unless it is their wish that is done, they will continue to drag the party down. So if you want to come back to the party, you must come with a contrite heart to be a member of the party that will be willing to accept decisions of the party, you know, as you go on. If you don't succeed today, tomorrow it will be a turn. This Soludo, remember, contested for governorship of Anambra State in 2013. He sought to be the candidate of ABGA. At that point, I was national chairman. He was disqualified, and he was disqualified principally because of the zoning arrangement we had at the time. We wanted the governor to come from the North Senatorial Zone. You know, he is from the South Senatorial Zone. At that time, I really wished he was the candidate, but because of this zoning that came up, he couldn't go forward. He was stopped, and he stayed for another 8 years before he was able to now get this ticket, because the governorship ticket was zoned to his senatorial zone where he comes from. And everybody wanted him because of his capacity, you know. So now he has won in a landslide fashion.
So that was what...
one should not be desperate.
That was what transpired within your own party. And you see that even within parties, to practice democracy and accept the results of democracy can be difficult. Nonetheless, there were fears as to how the elections were going to be conducted in Anambra, because prior to that time, we had seen insecurity escalating. We understand about 34,000 policemen were deployed to Anambra, not counting all the other security agencies who eventually had to, you know, show their presence as well in the state. Thankfully, the elections, you know, were conducted, but not without initial misgivings. First, about the number of security men who were being deployed to the state, and also about whether or not it was going to be free and fair. Would you say at the end of the day that your fears were unfounded?
No, the fears were well-founded, because, I mean, it was in the open. A few weeks to the election, Anambra State experienced a spate of violence that led to killings, particularly the killing of one important soul, Dr. Chika Akonyele, the husband of late Dora Akonyele. You know, when things got to that stage, every person became afraid of what will happen. There was anxiety everywhere. The fear was very palpable, and people, of course, naturally will opt to stay away from the election so that they will escape being hurt or killed. But I must commend the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He came out very strongly to assure that Anambra State must have that election, and that they would dominate the state with security operatives to ensure that the election held. But I have to tell you, the greater commendation will go to our traditional rulers and religious leaders. We had to resort to reaching out to our young people, you know, the people who have been threatening that there will be no election in Anambra State. They had to reach out through their own means, through publications, appeals, asking our young people to take things easy, agreed that there are founded reasons for their grievances, but they should allow for the process to continue. And through dialogue and persuasion, someday will find a meeting point where these nagging issues of marginalization of our people will be properly addressed in the Nigerian polity. So through negotiations, on the 4th of November, the IPOB declared openly that people should go and vote in the election. And the sit-at-home order, which they had issued for 1 week, beginning from 5th of November, the order was lifted. So it quickly, within 24 hours, restored confidence to the process that people who were ordinarily afraid to be in the election, to participate in the election, came out. Because by that week, the heavy presence of policemen, 34,587 policemen, with so many commissioners of police, AIGs and 1 DIG, 20,000 civil defense people, and about 5,000 soldiers. The armada was awesome. That even if there was a threat to that election, there was a total lockdown in the state. So anybody who wanted the election not to hold may have found it difficult to even come out from anywhere to spring any surprise. But the greatest threat to the election was that morbid fear in the minds of the electorate that they cannot come out. So when that order was lifted, it became a free exercise.
Well, we saw that on elections day, how, the people who came to vote came out in trickles. It was like as if they were sending emissaries to check, is it safe to come out?
If something was actually going on.
Yes, before they eventually did come out in their numbers.
Yeah.
But even then, when we now look at, because when I talked about fears, yes, there were fears about security. Those were genuine fears. But amongst the political parties, there were questions as to whether or not INEC was going to be conducting free and fair elections.
Yeah.
You had your misgivings, especially before the elections, and how the candidacy or otherwise of your candidate had been handled by INEC before we eventually went into the elections. And that was a fear I was referring to as being unfounded. Would you say it was unfounded?
Well, on the 25th of June, when I came here, you anchored it here, and it was between me and the INEC commissioner for media and publicity, voter education, Festus Okoye. I called on INEC to show utmost neutrality in the exercise, because the signs that were coming out at that point suggested otherwise. So I said, if you want this election to succeed, you must leave the political parties, without aiding anybody. Let the parties choose their candidates and they conduct the election. I was very strong on that program here, and eventually INEC decided to allow the courts to take their full course on all disagreements. And anytime a court delivered a judgment, INEC quickly complied. So through the judiciary, our judiciary was also awesome. They didn't waste time in dealing with any of these matters that came before it, and all the hurdles were cleared. Now, coming to the election itself, Anambra State had been a theater of all sorts of electoral brigandage in the past. So our people were not enthused about elections anymore, where they will vote for somebody, then at the end of it, another person will be returned. It started from 2003, proceeded, and through spirited struggle, most times going through the courts and all that before you can establish a winner. Our people, heightened with this insecurity, decided to leave the process. So there was no attraction to participate. But this election that held on 6th and 9th November, I will tell you, will change the whole scenario in terms of voter apathy, voter participation, citizens' interest in participating in electing leaders of their choice.
Why do you think so? We've done an analysis of voter turnout, and it would seem that it is consistently on the decline. Apart from the figures which we had for 2007, 2003, 2007, in the days when people said that, you know, we didn't have any sort of form of verification of who voters were or did not or were not. We've seen since 2011 a consistent decline in the number of people who come out to vote. Some people have said it's because they cannot make the link between the elections that are conducted and the impact on their lives.
Well, I think more damage was from the erosion of confidence on the part of the voters that their votes will ever count in deciding who leaders are, you know. If you recall, AfCFTA came in there in 2006 after 3 years of litigation, you know, before we could establish that P2B of AfCFTA won the election. He came in from 2006 till date. The problem is no longer dividends of democracy that we are lacking, because AfCFTA maintained a steady, strong effort in rebuilding the state. From 2006 till date, the people have trusted AfCFTA. It's not because of the electoral process. It's because of the genuine efforts the party and the governors that have served under the party have made over the years towards changing the narratives and the storyline in Anambra State. So the people believed strongly that this party has a mission in the state. And that is why, ahead of this election, despite the hula baloo and noise made and writing the party off, I consistently was telling everybody that based on the scorecard of AfCFTA and knowing where we brought the state out from 2006, that there's no way Anambra people will drop AfCFTA. They didn't believe it. And when the election came, they gave them an emphatic mandate again, 19 local governments, outright victory. In 2017, it was victory in the entire 21 local governments. Despite the noise made then, people are able to count their gains at every opportunity. So this one now that came was a reaffirmation of the trust the people have in the party in terms of service.
Never mind that you lost 2 local governments.
Now those 2 local governments, let me tell you, we lost 1 local government by 300 votes. So we came strongly second. The other one, no, we not, where my friend is a superman, Senator Ifanyoba, he got 6,000. AfCFTA came second again with 3,600 and something votes. So these 2 local governments where we didn't win outright, out of the 21, we came second, you know. That of Obaru local government, I'll tell you, if not for one stronghold we had, if the election had gone on there, they didn't divert the materials, you know, we would have won again. We have won 20 local governments.
I mean, these are some of the hiccups that, you know, we keep saying. So I want to ask you about the process. And for these elections, INEC introduced another innovation, beavers. We've now moved from the card accreditation. I'm trying to remember the name of the old one that we used to use. But this is what we have now. Beavers is the new buzzword, so to speak. How would you rate the beavers in the conduct of the elections that happened in your state?
Wonderful innovation. Like I said, after this election, watch out the next election in Anambra State. If the beavers is sustained, in 2023, there will be remarkable improvement in the turnout of voters.
This is despite the hitches.
Yes, despite the hitches, because at the end of the day, INEC was able to deliver a transparent, credible election, where if there were any lapses, it affected everybody evenly. So there was no offshoot of attempt by INEC to favor any candidate. You know, the candidates were left to go to the people and get elected with their votes.
What did you like particularly about the beavers that was introduced?
The beavers it doesn't tolerate rigging, because one, accreditation is by fingerprint recognition. If you place your thumb on the knob there, if the machine recognizes you, it records your accreditation immediately. At the end of accreditation, you will know how many people have been accredited to vote. And there will be no opportunity for you to change the figure. So only those accredited will vote. The votes will be tallied and sorted out among the parties. So it's not like before when they had a smart card reader. You do some parts and then say you have incident form. When the machine fails to read their card, they will give you a form to fill. So with that, politicians and the fraudulent people manipulated elections in the past. But in this instance, once you are not accredited, there was no incident form. So there will be no room to flying in figures later on. That was why in the exercise, in some places where they had some challenges, people out of the push to rig started writing results without recourse to the Beavers machine. No accreditation, no system of accreditation. Of course, INEC made it clear that any vote that does not come from the number of accredited voters recorded in the Beavers, nonsense. It's nonsense. Nobody tolerated that. So the whole thing was kept clean and transparent. The usual election riggers in the state we knew very well. We were sweating on Saturday. They had nowhere to do anything. Any attempt they made was repelled, and INEC was very firm, firm control of the process. And you can see it's being commended everywhere.
Does it leave you optimistic about the 2023 elections, regardless of the fact that, entire swathes of voters could be disenfranchised as a result of a failure, perhaps, if that should ever come up?
No, like I said, they've used beavers in Delta State in a by-election, state constituency election. They've now used it in Anambra. I think one thing that we noticed was the failure on the part of the network providers. Once the signals, if the signal is strong, the beavers has no problem. They had to resort to using various softwares to improve the signal on the machine. And what INEC did was, in pushing this device into the election, they also made sure they provided ICT support technicians everywhere. So if the Beavers machine is not working, there must be an ICT technician to support the election in that electoral ward, in that registration area in the ward. So once it happens, you look for them, they'll come and attend to it, and they start working. So it's a work in progress, and I know by the time they get into the 2023 general elections, there must be a way of enhancing signal network on the machine, on the device. If they're able to do that, particularly identifying a network that is stronger than the rest and use it to configure the device, then there will be no noise anywhere. If you come, capture you vote, you go away. No molestation. And again, in Anambra, on these 2 days, the elections held, the security agencies demonstrated awesome professionalism. So it reaffirms the position of so many of us that if we are out to do the correcting in this country, the correcting will be done. So every party, the security people, INEC, and even politicians have no choice. Because once the process is not there for them to manipulate, they'll start sweating.
I want to ask you some questions vis-a-vis the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, which is now before the President. Oh, well, we do not know if it's been transmitted. We know it is awaiting transmission. I'm sure when it gets to the President's
desk, it must be transmitted.
Yes. we will eventually know. However, the National Assembly has passed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill with some areas which they think is going to be transformational. One of them is transmission of results, electronic transmission of results, which was a bone of contention. And then now we are hearing of direct primaries for parties. How do you think that's going to affect your party and the conduct of future elections?
First, on the electronic transmission of results, excellent reform. because even in the elections conducted recently, particularly that one of Anambra State, the rigging pattern had always been to use collation processes to conjure figures and distort the will of the people. But in this instance, through that electronic transmission, from the polling units, when results are collated from the polling units, when you tally them, they were transmitting to the INEC portal direct. So even from anywhere in the world, you'll be viewing the results of the election before the collation starts even itself. So it was a very great achievement by INEC that figures were getting to the portals from the polling units. So whatever you do at ward collation, local government collation, everybody is doing it together. Because you look at the portal, you'll be adding. By the time you are done, the same result will be available to everybody.
You already know
so
who the
electronic,
winner is. You already have an idea of who.
You already have an idea. We are only waiting for official announcement of result. Because even if you view distance, you are not entitled to declare yourself a winner. So you still wait for INEC to finish the official job and announce the results of the election and make a return. So, but everybody will have an idea of who has won. And that is it. So electronic transmission of results is a bold step in our electoral reform. Then on the direct primaries, I will, because I was national chairman of a party for 10 years, I knew nomination processes, the challenges therein. For direct primaries, the arguments I listened to, particularly from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Bajabiamila, is that they want everybody in the party to be part of nominating a candidate. But that will come with very huge challenges. One is that you're all trying to do a general election through the political parties before the general election. It was when you say everybody who is a registered member will participate in nominating the candidate. It's like conducting a mini general election. Question will be, will the parties have the logistics to be able to cover these primaries in all the local governments in a general election, not off-season election? So if 2023 comes now, all the states that will elect president, elect governor, elect National Assembly members, elect House of Assembly members at the same time, the party will conduct direct primaries to choose these candidates.
So that's the encumbrance, but you know, on the flip side, there are advantages to it. Do you think it should be made compulsory that political parties, you know, do direct primaries, or do you think that the option should be left open for direct or indirect?
I think it is better left for a party to decide the means it will be convenient to it to nominate its candidates for an election. By legislating on the imperativeness of everybody voting to nominate a candidate, you will end up creating chaos in the system, because what they were trying to stop was the idea of using indirect primaries where delegates are used to nominate candidates. And they said some strong people will manipulate the delegates list and then give an end result that they predetermine. But if you throw it open to everybody, it will be difficult to control. But then the processes of that primary election will be under the control of the party. So even if you send people to the field and say they want Maukbe is the best candidate for this election, and you go to direct primary, they said we want to stop Maukbe, who will win the election for the party, you know, the party will still nominate Maukbe in the end. So it's trying to solve a problem, and then you create another problem. I believe what should concern people more is the process of electing those leaders by the general electorate
Senator,
how they do it in the
we're
parties.
totally out of time. We have to thank you for your thoughts this morning.
Yeah.
We say congratulations to you and your party once again. Senator Victor Omeh is the former national chairman of the All Progressives Grand Alliance. Well, that's all we have to leave it this morning, because we have been talking about a review of the Anambra elections, which was conducted on the 6th and 9th of this month of November. We're trying to see if we can get a few of your mails. I can see this one from Professor Chris Enakina talking about Nigeria's place in AfCFTA. He says, for Nigeria's economy to be competitive, we must diversify, grow the SMEs, provide enabling environment for sustainable economic development and prosperity, while our lending rates must be reduced to single digits, and continental government must invest in agriculture where we have comparative advantage.
Well, Henry Okeke says, locally and continentally, there are lots of challenges, discouraging factors on intra-African trade. Patronage is a major challenge. It is the responsibility of African governments to work with the private sector and embrace shop local trading philosophy.
Governments first. Festus Akimboyewa says on the same issue, we must not forget that trade has become complex. Intra-industry trade is soaring across the world. Sadly, many of our industries are moribund. Where's our textile industry today? Where's our Nigeria Airways? Until we revive our dying industries, we may not benefit much from intra-African trade.
Well, our Nigeria Airways is in the air. You should just be patient. It will soon materialize. We have to thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Ayo Makide. Have a wonderful day and keep safe.
I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.